In the middle of the Cold War, beneath thousands of meters of dark, silent Pacific Ocean, the Soviet Union believed one of its greatest secrets had been lost forever. A nuclear-armed submarine had vanished into the abyss, resting on the ocean floor far beyond the reach of any human technology. To Moscow, it was a tragedy. To the world, it was a mystery. But to the United States, it was something else entirely, an opportunity. Because what the Soviet Union did not know was that somewhere inside the Pentagon and deep within the intelligence community, American engineers, naval officers, and CIA strategists were preparing for one of the most audacious engineering missions ever attempted in human history. Their goal was not just to study the wreckage. Their goal was to raise the entire submarine from the ocean floor, more than 3 miles beneath the surface. If they succeeded, the United States would gain access to Soviet nuclear technology, encrypted communications equipment, and the secrets of the Soviet Navy itself. It was a mission so bold, so improbable, that even many inside the government believed it could not possibly work. And yet, the plan moved forward. To understand why the United States was willing to attempt something so extreme, you have to go back to the late 1960s, when the Cold War was at one of its most dangerous peaks. The oceans had become the invisible front line of a global strategic standoff. Soviet ballistic missile submarines roamed the seas, carrying nuclear weapons capable of destroying American cities in minutes. The United States responded with its own fleet of submarines and surveillance systems, creating a silent underwater battlefield where neither side could afford to fall behind. In that environment, every piece of intelligence mattered: the design of a torpedo, the encryption system inside a communications room. Even the mechanical layout of a propulsion system could reveal how an adversary fought and how it might be defeated. For intelligence analysts in Washington, the possibility of examining a Soviet submarine directly was almost unimaginable. And yet, in 1968, fate delivered exactly that opportunity. In March of that year, a Soviet Golf-class ballistic missile submarine, later identified as K-129, disappeared somewhere in the vast waters of the North Pacific Ocean. It had been carrying nuclear missiles and operating under strict secrecy, but something catastrophic had happened. Whether it was an internal explosion, a missile malfunction, or a collision with another vessel remains debated even today. What is known is that the submarine sank rapidly, falling thousands of meters into the depths until it settled on the ocean floor. For the Soviet Union, locating the wreckage proved almost impossible. The Pacific Ocean is enormous, and the technology required to scan the deep seafloor at that scale simply did not exist in the Soviet arsenal at the time. Search efforts were launched, but after weeks of failure, Moscow quietly concluded that the submarine had been lost forever. But the United States had an advantage the Soviets did not fully understand. Across the Pacific, a secret network of underwater listening systems, part of a surveillance system designed to detect submarines through acoustic signals, had recorded the moment of the disaster. Analysts studying the recordings could pinpoint the approximate location where the submarine had imploded under immense pressure. The coordinates were not perfect, but they were close enough to guide a search. Suddenly, American intelligence had something extraordinary: the potential location of a Soviet nuclear submarine sitting on the ocean floor. The discovery immediately triggered intense discussions inside the CIA and the Department of Defense. If the wreckage could somehow be reached, the intelligence value would be immense. Soviet missiles, code machines, sonar equipment, torpedoes, and navigation systems might still be intact inside the hull. In a conflict defined by secrecy and technological competition, recovering those systems could provide insights that might take decades to obtain through other means. But there was a problem. Actually reaching the submarine was a monumental challenge. The wreck rested nearly 5,000 meters below the surface, deeper than most submarines could safely dive. Even locating it visually would require advanced deep-sea exploration technology that was still in its infancy. Yet this was the Cold War, an era when technological ambition was fueled by geopolitical rivalry. American leaders believed that if the Soviet Union gained similar access to U.S. secrets, they would attempt the same operation without hesitation. The question was no longer whether the mission was possible. The question was whether the United States was willing to attempt something never done before. Engineers began studying the challenge. Traditional salvage operations were impossible at such depths. The pressure alone could crush conventional equipment, like aluminum cans. Any system designed to grab the wreck would have to operate thousands of meters underwater, remain stable in deep-sea currents, and lift a massive steel submarine that weighed thousands of tons. Even if such a machine could be built, another problem remained: secrecy. The Soviet Union could not be allowed to discover the operation. If they realized the United States was attempting to recover their submarine, the mission would instantly become an international crisis. The solution required not only engineering genius, but also one of the most elaborate cover stories ever created. The CIA needed a vessel capable of operating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean for months without attracting suspicion. It had to be enormous, powerful, and equipped with unprecedented lifting technology. Yet it also needed to appear as something completely unrelated to military intelligence. That is when an unusual ally entered the picture: billionaire industrialist Howard Hughes. Hughes was already famous around the world as an aviation pioneer, film producer, and eccentric businessman. He also had a reputation for funding ambitious technological ventures. CIA planners realized that Hughes could provide the perfect cover story. If a massive ship were built under the pretense of deep-sea mining, searching for valuable minerals on the ocean floor, few people would question it. The oceans were full of unexplored resources, and Hughes had the wealth and reputation to pursue such an experiment. Behind the scenes, however, the ship would be designed for something far more extraordinary: lifting a Soviet submarine from the depths of the Pacific. The project was given an internal name that sounded almost mundane: Project Azorian. But inside classified briefings, everyone involved understood that the mission was anything but ordinary. It would require the construction of one of the largest and most complex vessels ever built, equipped with a gigantic mechanical claw capable of descending nearly 3 miles into the ocean and grasping the shattered hull of a Cold War submarine. The engineering challenges were staggering. Every component had to operate flawlessly under extreme pressure and remain completely hidden from Soviet surveillance. Construction began in secrecy. Shipyards worked under strict confidentiality agreements. Engineers developed entirely new lifting systems, and intelligence officials carefully monitored Soviet naval activity to ensure the mission would remain undetected. As the plans grew more detailed, the scale of the operation became clearer. This was not simply a salvage mission. It was a demonstration of American technological audacity. If successful, it would prove that the United States possessed the ability to reach into the deepest parts of the ocean and recover one of the Soviet Union's most guarded military secrets. But even the most optimistic engineers knew the truth. No one had ever attempted anything like this before. The margin for failure was enormous. If the lifting mechanism broke, the submarine could shatter. If Soviet ships discovered the operation, the mission could trigger an international confrontation. And if the engineering calculations were wrong by even a small amount, the entire operation could collapse into the darkness of the Pacific. Yet despite those risks, the project continued to move forward. Because in the Cold War, the competition between superpowers was not just about weapons. It was about proving who could achieve the impossible. And somewhere beneath the waves of the North Pacific, a lost Soviet submarine waited silently on the ocean floor, unaware that the most ambitious underwater recovery mission in history was already underway. And what happened next would become one of the most astonishing covert operations ever attempted. A story of engineering on a scale the world had never seen, carried out in complete secrecy while the Soviet Union remained unaware that its submarine was about to be lifted from the depths. As the plan for Project Azorian moved from theory to reality, the scope of what the United States was attempting became almost unbelievable. This was no ordinary salvage operation. The wreck of the Soviet submarine K-129 rested nearly 3 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in darkness so complete that sunlight had never reached those depths. The pressure at that level of the ocean was immense, powerful enough to crush steel structures that were not designed to withstand it. Even the strongest submarines ever built could not safely descend that far. And yet, American engineers were preparing to reach down into that hostile environment and lift a vessel weighing thousands of tons back to the surface. The challenge required a completely new kind of ship, something the world had never seen before. This vessel would not only need to survive months at sea, but would also have to act as a floating engineering platform capable of lowering an enormous mechanical system deep into the ocean. The lifting apparatus alone would be unlike anything ever constructed. It needed to descend thousands of meters, remain stable in ocean currents, and clamp onto the broken hull of a submarine that had been lying on the seabed for years. Every part of the system had to function perfectly, because once the lift began, there would be no way to fix a failure thousands of meters underwater. To accomplish this, the United States secretly built one of the most unusual ships in naval history, the Glomar Explorer. Officially, it was described as a vessel designed for deep-sea mining, a ship built to collect valuable minerals from the ocean floor. The cover story explained that the ship would harvest manganese nodules, rare metal deposits scattered across the seabed that were believed to hold significant economic value. To the public and most of the world, it looked like an ambitious industrial project funded by the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes. But behind the scenes, the ship was something entirely different. It was a machine built for a single purpose: to recover a Soviet nuclear submarine in complete secrecy. The Glomar Explorer was massive, stretching more than 600 feet in length. But the most extraordinary feature of the vessel was hidden inside its hull. Engineers designed a gigantic internal bay, known as the moon pool, located in the center of the ship. This opening allowed equipment to be lowered directly to the bottom of the vessel, while remaining concealed from outside observers. From the surface, it would appear that nothing unusual was happening. But inside the ship, a complex system of pipes, cables, and mechanical arms would descend into the ocean, piece by piece, forming a structure capable of reaching the seabed. At the end of this enormous lifting system was a device unlike anything previously built: a giant mechanical claw, officially called the capture vehicle. It resembled an enormous metal hand, designed to wrap around the submarine's hull. Each of its steel fingers had to be strong enough to hold thousands of tons of weight while operating under crushing pressure. Engineers spent countless hours calculating the stresses that the claw would endure. If even one of its arms failed during the lift, the submarine could slip free and fall back into the darkness of the ocean floor. While construction of the Glomar Explorer continued, another critical step took place quietly in the Pacific. American deep-sea exploration vessels were dispatched to confirm the exact location of the Soviet submarine. Using advanced cameras and remotely operated equipment, they descended into depths and eventually captured images that confirmed the wreck's position. When analysts saw the photographs, they realized just how difficult the recovery would be. The submarine had broken apart when it struck the seabed. Sections of the hull were damaged, and parts of structure had collapsed under the immense pressure of the deep ocean. Lifting it would be far more complicated than simply grabbing an intact vessel. But despite the risks, the intelligence value of the submarine remained enormous. Inside the wreck were likely nuclear missiles, encryption systems, and Soviet naval technology that American engineers had never been able to examine directly. During the Cold War, understanding the capabilities of an adversary could change the balance of power. The chance to study Soviet submarine technology firsthand was almost too valuable to ignore. As the Glomar Explorer neared completion, Project Azorian entered its most delicate phase. The mission required absolute secrecy. If Soviet intelligence discovered what the ship was truly built to do, they could dispatch naval vessels to the area and monitor the operation. Even the presence of a Soviet reconnaissance ship nearby could threaten the entire project. The CIA therefore created an elaborate operational plan to disguise the ship's movements and activities. Crew members were carefully selected and sworn to secrecy. Many of them believed they were participating in a legitimate mining experiment, unaware that the real mission involved recovering a lost submarine from the Cold War. In 1974, after years of planning, engineering, and construction, the Glomar Explorer finally set sail toward a recovery site in the North Pacific. The voyage itself was tense. Every radar contact on the horizon, every passing ship, and every aircraft overhead was carefully observed. The crew understood that if Soviet intelligence suspected the real purpose of the mission, the operation might have to be abandoned immediately. When the ship finally reached the recovery location, the scale of the challenge became clear. Beneath the vessel lay nearly 5,000 meters of ocean, an enormous vertical distance separating the ship from the wreckage below. To reach the submarine, the crew began assembling the lifting system piece by piece. Giant steel pipes were lowered to the moon pool, each section connecting to the next as the structure slowly descended into the abyss. It was a painstaking process that required extreme precision. The slightest misalignment could cause the entire assembly to bend or break under its own weight. Day after day, the pipe string grew longer as it disappeared into the depths. The crew worked around the clock, carefully guiding each section into place while the ship maintained its exact position above the wreck site. This alone was a remarkable achievement. Holding a vessel steady in the open ocean while deploying thousands of meters of heavy equipment required advanced stabilization systems that were rarely used at the time. Finally, after weeks of careful preparation, the capture vehicle reached the ocean floor. For the first time, the giant mechanical claw hovered above the shattered remains of the Soviet submarine K-129. Cameras transmitted grainy images of the wreckage back to the control room aboard the Glomar Explorer. What the operators saw confirmed their earlier fears. The submarine had been severely damaged by the immense pressures of the deep ocean. Large sections of the hull were twisted and broken. Recovering the vessel would be even more difficult than engineers had predicted, but the mission had come too far to stop now. Slowly and carefully, the mechanical claw descended toward the wreck, each arm extended outward, positioning itself around the broken hull of the submarine. Engineers monitored every movement from the surface, knowing that a single mistake could end the mission. If the claw slipped or applied too much force, the fragile remains of the submarine could crumble completely. At that moment, suspended nearly 3 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, the success of Project Azorian hung in the balance. The most ambitious underwater recovery mission ever attempted was about to begin its most dangerous phase, lifting a Soviet nuclear submarine from the ocean floor, while the world remained completely unaware that it was happening. Far below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in a world of crushing pressure and total darkness, the massive mechanical claw slowly closed around the shattered hull of the Soviet submarine. Inside the control room of the Glomar Explorer, engineers and intelligence officers watched the monitors in complete silence. Every movement of the capture vehicle was transmitted through cables and cameras that stretched thousands of meters down into the abyss. The images were grainy, distorted by the deep ocean environment, but they were clear enough to reveal the scale of what the United States was attempting. The submarine K-129 lay broken across the seabed, its steel hull scarred by the violent forces that had sent it plunging to the bottom years earlier. Some sections remained intact, but other parts had collapsed under the immense pressure of the deep ocean. For the engineers guiding the capture vehicle, this made the operation even more dangerous. The claw had been designed to lift thousands of tons, but the submarine itself was no longer a solid structure. If the hull broke apart during the ascent, the wreckage could slip from the mechanical grip and disappear back into the darkness forever. And yet, the operation moved forward. From the surface, commands traveled down through the enormous pipe string that connected the ship to the capture vehicle. Each instruction had to be precise. Each movement had to be controlled with extreme care. Slowly, the giant steel fingers of claw positioned themselves around the submarine's hull, settling into place beneath its twisted structure. Then came the moment everyone aboard the ship had been waiting for. The lift began, thousands of meters above the wreck. The machinery of the Glomar Explorer roared to life. Massive hydraulic systems engaged as the pipe string began to pull upward, inch by inch, carrying the captured submarine with it. The process was agonizingly slow. Engineers had calculated that the ascent would take many hours, perhaps even days. The weight being lifted was enormous, and every meter of upward movement placed increasing stress on the lifting system. Inside the control room, tension filled the air. Every sensor reading mattered. Engineers monitored pressure levels, mechanical stress, and structural integrity in real time. If the claw experienced too much strain, the entire lifting system could fail. If the submarine shifted inside the mechanical grip, the wreck might break apart and fall back to the ocean floor. Yet slowly, almost unbelievably, the submarine began to rise. For the first time since 1968, the Soviet vessel was leaving the seabed, meter by meter. The enormous steel structure moved upward through black waters of the Pacific. The deeper sections of the lift passed in tense silence. Every creak and vibration inside the ship made the crew uneasy. No one had ever attempted to raise an object of the size from such depth before. The operation pushed the limits of engineering in ways that few people outside the project could even imagine. Hours passed. The submarine continued its slow journey toward the surface. Inside the ship, CIA officers and engineers knew that if the operation succeeded, the intelligence value would be enormous. Soviet nuclear missiles might still be inside the wreck. Cryptographic equipment used for naval communications could reveal how Soviet submarines transmitted orders during wartime. Even small pieces of machinery could provide insight into Soviet engineering techniques. But the mission was not only about intelligence. It was also about demonstrating technological superiority. The Cold War was filled with moments where each superpower attempted to prove that its technology was more advanced, its engineers more capable, its science more powerful. Raising a Soviet submarine from nearly 5,000 meters below the ocean would be a feat unlike anything the world had seen before. And for a time, it seemed the impossible might actually succeed. But then, deep within the lifting system, something went wrong. Sensors aboard the Glomar Explorer began registering unusual stress patterns along the capture vehicle. The submarine's damaged hull was beginning to shift. The massive weight of the wreck was placing enormous pressure on the steel arms of the claw. Engineers watched the data with growing concern as the lift continued. Suddenly, a violent jolt traveled up the pipe string. Deep beneath the ocean, part of the submarine structure had collapsed. Inside the control room, alarms began flashing across the monitoring panels. The crew realized instantly what had happened. The damaged hull could no longer support the forces acting upon it. As the submarine was lifted higher through the water column, the weakened sections of its structure began to break apart. Moments later, the unthinkable happened. Several of the mechanical arms holding the submarine lost their grip as large sections of the wreckage snapped away from the main hull. In an instant, thousands of tons of Soviet submarine fell back toward the seabed. Even through the distorted camera feed, operators could see pieces of the vessel slipping free and disappearing into blackness below. Inside the control room, the silence was overwhelming. Years of planning, billions of dollars in engineering, and one of the most daring covert operations ever attempted had just suffered a catastrophic setback. But not all of the submarine had been lost. Despite the collapse, a section of the forward hull remained trapped inside the capture vehicle. It was not the entire submarine as originally planned, but it was still an extraordinary achievement. The crew quickly stabilized the lifting system, carefully continuing the ascent with a portion of the wreck that remained secured inside the claw. Even this partial recovery represented something remarkable. For the first time in history, a submarine from one superpower had been secretly recovered by another, lifted from nearly 3 miles beneath the ocean surface without the world ever knowing. Slowly, the remaining section of the Soviet submarine continued its journey upward. Above them, the Pacific Ocean stretched for thousands of meters. Around them, the world continued unaware of what was happening deep beneath the waves. And aboard the Glomar Explorer, the crew prepared for the moment when the captured wreckage would finally reach the surface, revealing secrets the Soviet Union had never intended anyone else to see. As the remaining section of the Soviet submarine slowly rose toward the surface, the tension aboard the Glomar Explorer was almost unbearable. For days, the crew had operated in near silence, focused entirely on the delicate process unfolding thousands of meters beneath them. The loss of a large portion of the submarine had been a devastating moment, but the mission was not over. A section of the vessel, still containing potentially valuable intelligence, was continuing its long ascent through the dark waters of the Pacific. The lifting system groaned under the immense weight, but it held. Meter by meter, the captured wreckage approached the ship above. Engineers monitored every sensor and structural reading as the pipe string continued to retract upward. The mechanical claw still gripped a portion of the submarine's forward section, a twisted mass of steel that had once been part of a nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarine patrolling the Cold War oceans. For the men aboard the Glomar Explorer, the moment carried enormous historical weight. What they were witnessing had never been done before. In an era defined by technological rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, this mission represented a level of engineering ambition that bordered on the unbelievable. The idea that a vessel could reach nearly 3 miles into the ocean, grab a massive submarine, and lift it back to the surface was something many experts had once considered impossible. And yet here it was happening. When the captured section finally reached the moon pool beneath the ship, the crew carefully maneuvered the wreckage into the massive internal bay hidden within the hull of the Glomar Explorer. This concealed area had been designed specifically so that the submarine could be brought aboard without ever being visible from outside the ship to any satellite or passing vessel. The operation would appear completely ordinary. No one would see the remains of a Soviet submarine being secretly pulled into an American intelligence vessel in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Once the wreckage was secured inside the ship, intelligence teams began their work. Although much of the submarine had been lost during the lift, the recovered section still contained valuable information. Analysts examined structural components, machinery, and internal equipment in an effort to understand more about Soviet submarine technology. Every detail mattered. Even small discoveries could provide insight into how Soviet naval engineers approached design, propulsion, sonar systems, and weapons integration. But perhaps the most powerful moment of the recovery came when the crew discovered that several Soviet sailors remained inside the recovered portion of the submarine. These men had perished when K-129 sank years earlier, and their bodies have remained entombed within the wreckage on the ocean floor ever since. In an unexpected and deeply respectful gesture, the United States decided to conduct a formal burial at sea for the Soviet sailors. Their remains were placed in metal caskets and prepared according to naval tradition on the deck of the Glomar Explorer. American crew members gathered as the bodies were lowered into the Pacific Ocean with full military honors. The moment was solemn and quiet. Even in the middle of the Cold War, even while engaged in one of the most secret intelligence missions ever conducted, the United States recognized the shared humanity of the sailors who had lost their lives beneath the ocean. Years later, when some details of Project Azorian eventually became public, video footage of that burial ceremony was quietly shared with Russian officials. It revealed something remarkable about the mission. Yes, it had been a daring intelligence operation. Yes, it had been a demonstration of American engineering power and strategic ambition. But it had also been conducted with a level of respect that transcended the political rivalry of the era. Despite the partial loss of the submarine during the lift, Project Azorian was still considered one of the most extraordinary covert operations of the Cold War. The engineering challenges alone were staggering. Designing a vessel capable of lifting thousands of tons from nearly 5,000 meters below the ocean surface pushed the boundaries of technology in ways that few projects ever had. The operation also demonstrated something fundamental about the Cold War itself. While the conflict was often defined by nuclear weapons, political crises, and military standoffs, it was also a competition of science, engineering, and technological imagination. Both superpowers constantly searched for ways to gain an advantage, whether in space, beneath the oceans, or deep inside the world of intelligence gathering. In the case of Project Azorian, the United States proved it could do something the Soviet Union had never even imagined possible. It reached into the deepest parts of the ocean and recovered one of the Soviet Navy's most secret weapons, all while maintaining complete secrecy from the very nation that had built it. For years, the mission remained one of the most closely guarded secrets in American intelligence history. Even many people inside the U.S. government knew little about it. The ship, the technology, and the operation itself were hidden behind layers of classification. But as time passed and Cold War archives slowly opened, the story of Project Azorian began to emerge. And when historians and engineers finally understood what had happened in the Pacific Ocean in 1974, the reaction was almost universal: disbelief. Because lifting a Soviet submarine from nearly 3 miles beneath the ocean surface was not just an intelligence operation. It was a demonstration of what American engineering, innovation, and determination could achieve when the stakes of history were at their highest. And in the silent depths of the Pacific Ocean, where the wreck of K-129 had once rested undisturbed, the Cold War had produced one of its most astonishing and least known victories.